Remember, to the people of Jesus' day, blindness was assumed to be a punishment for sinning against God. But one who is blind from birth brought an interesting conundrum. For how can a baby commit a sin against God? Or is the child blind due to the sin of his parents? Jesus' reply here makes it clear that such affliction is not necessarily a punishment from God, nor is it necessarily random. Sometimes it's merely an opportunity for the works of God to be shown to everyone else. This raising a question for some of us. Has the hand of God touched everything that has happened? However, I think it would be better to ask, is there anything that the hand of God cannot touch? For indeed, the miraculous healing had been only the beginning of this change in the man's life. This formerly blind man, having been healed, began now a journey that would bring him to claim the lordship of Jesus Christ in his life. His struggle with the truth and the challenges to that truth would, in the end, make the real difference in his life. The man's deepening faith journey began in an unexpected meeting with Jesus. Held captive in the prison of his sin, he was blind. But touched by Jesus, his sin no longer holds him bondage, and his eyes are opened not only to the light of day, but also to the light of the world, Jesus Christ. And at that moment when his eyes are open, begins the struggle that truly changes his life. But that struggle is not his alone. Seeing the miracle causes quite a stir among the townspeople. His neighbors, his family, and the leaders of the community want to know what has happened. And all this man can say at first is what was done by the man Jesus. The Pharisees obviously are concerned that the healing was done on the Sabbath. It is as though they care nothing for the actual miracle that a man born blind can now see because of the actions of a man. All they care about is that it happened on the Sabbath, and you're not supposed to heal people on the Sabbath. And so they call this man's parents to testify because they don't believe the man, who, though they testify to the truth of his previous blindness, they answer nothing more. Challenged again by the Pharisees and by their unbelief, the formerly blind man becomes bolder, perhaps even with that touch of sarcasm when he adds, "Do you want to become his disciples?" For he is now willing to be counted as a disciple of Jesus. Remember, his first answer is, "A man named Jesus opened my eyes." Now he's willing to say that he is a disciple of this man, Jesus, whom he has yet to look upon with his newly opened eyes. He's willing to be counted as a disciple. His belief that Jesus had been sent from God comes to the forefront of what he knows to be true. And he, in the end, realizing and proclaiming that Jesus is indeed the promised Son of Man, that he must be the Messiah, because who else could do such a thing? Now, through this whole episode, it would have been natural for this formerly blind man to recant his testimony, to make up a story, just to get out of the situation. He is being challenged by people with power over him. But here we see something that has been witnessed to so often throughout the history of the life of faith in the people of God. With each challenge to the truth of what happened, the man's faith and the man's understanding, and indeed his courage to speak the truth, becomes deeper and stronger. Each challenge to the truth of what has happened and who this man Jesus is strengthens the man's faith, and his vision of Jesus becomes clearer and clearer. Now, I experienced something like this myself when I was in college. And though warned that a certain professor would try to tear down my faith, Each challenge to my preconceived notions, or perhaps better stated, each challenge to my childhood understanding of God or Jesus or faith in general, found me growing stronger in my faith and in my commitment to Christ. Every time he tried to take those notions that I understood from my childhood and tried to give me another reason why it could be, each challenge to why faith and why religion indeed, why God even exists, did not tear my faith away, but rather those challenges forced me to consider what it was that I believed and what it was I was saying. And in that challenge and the self-examination of what it meant to me made me stronger in my faith. And in the end, to be honest with you, I suspect that was the professor's real objective. As he said later in another class, because I couldn't get enough of this guy, he said words that I have never forgotten, and indeed words that have totally informed my life and my ministry. Because he said to us, in speaking about the miracles of the Bible, did it happen, or how did it happen, is not the question to ask. The question to consider is, what difference does it make? For this previously blind man, sure, he could see again. But the real difference it made in his life is that it caused him to proclaim the truth about who and what Jesus really was. Each challenge to what happened to him caused him to more fully embrace and understand the whole of the truth about Jesus Christ. For the Pharisees, it was a truth that they could not embrace without letting it make a real change in everything they had believed, and so they chose to reject the truth. The blind man, in embracing the truth, deepened not only his conviction, but his faith and his understanding of the truth about Jesus Christ. Again, though the miracle of the healing was important, it was the journey of faith that makes the real difference here. What begins with a meeting with Jesus. And as we journey on in our own life, each challenge then offers us the opportunity either to reject the truth or to embrace it more clearly. Our lives then, like the blind man in this gospel lesson, can be full of conflict and joy. Our lives of faith will be ones with struggles and celebrations because of who and what Jesus means to us. And each of these events can bring us, in the end, closer to Christ if we can hold on to the truth. John Newton, if you don't know that name, you will in a moment. John Newton was a sea captain, and later a ship's captain who got into the very lucrative slave trade. By his own admission, he had sunk into the lowest of moralities. But on one of those voyages, he read part of a book entitled The Imitation of Christ. And in that reading, he met Christ, and his journey began. As he grew in his faith, he saw more clearly the evil that was embodied in slavery. Soon he would give it up. He even began to work against it. And eventually he gave up the sea altogether so that he might become a pastor, dedicating his life and working mostly with the poor and the uneducated people of England. And in 1779, he wrote the words to a hymn that has become one of the best-known hymns of all time, Amazing Grace. In it, he tells of his own journey, that though he was once blind to the truth, he could now see. Friends, like John Newton, we too must recognize that we have in our lives been blind. But in Jesus, we begin to see the light and the truth. And so it is with us. Through the work of Jesus Christ, our eyes can be opened. And as we grow in faith, our vision and our understanding of Jesus becomes clearer. And we become bolder in our proclamation of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. And our spiritual sight is restored, and it is clarified, and it is strengthened. And in those moments, we can find ourselves more emboldened and more strengthened by that truth. And if we stick to that truth, if we proclaim that truth, not only will we become stronger, but like those other people seeing the man once blind and now able to see, a man who only understood that somebody did something, who later professes Jesus as the Messiah, then we too can influence the people around us. And all we need do is stick to the truth and not give in to the challenges. For truly, the truth is what will set us free.